Hi, Sai, and Sai here for Music Radar. Today we are looking at Steampipe.
Yeah, Steampipe. So we first saw this quite a while ago, didn't we? It was like
2023?
Super Booth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
think
So
so.
that's when they first revealed it. It's been out a few months, kind of in the wild now. But
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about it today because it's a really interesting synth.
Yeah.
That is quite different to a lot of other stuff on the market, and it's just worth having a little explore and talking about it and seeing what it does.
And also changing my mind, because I wasn't super enamoured at the start, and I'm still yet to be wooed by said Steampipe. So
Yeah. Okay. So when we first saw this, like I said, Super Booth like 2 years ago.
yeah.
And the kind of general pitch of it is it's a synth designed, as the name Steampipe kind of suggests, to do wind instrument type things, those
Yeah.
kind of tones, kind of pipe organy noises.
Uh-huh.
But actually, the more you dive into it, the more it's kind of more than that.
Yeah, okay.
So let me give you a quick overview.
Okay.
Steampipe is a all digital machine.
Yeah.
And it's using a synthesis approach called physical modeling.
Yep.
So physical modeling, like anyone who has used a lot of software synths might have encountered it or heard of it.
Yeah.
It's quite common these days because you find it in things like Ableton Collision, and there's like Chromophone, etc., like
Yeah.
these plugins that use physical modeling. And basically what physical modeling does is it creates sound by, as the name would suggest, modeling the kind of physical resonances of like real objects.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's quite different from the subtractive synthesis that you would know from like classic analog synths and things like that. So we're not talking. We have got kind of like things like envelopes, etc. on here that will look familiar,
Yes.
but we're not talking about the same sort of synth formats where we've got an oscillator going into a filter
Sure,
going into an envelope.
Sure. Yeah. We are, well, like you say, modelling physical instruments.
Yeah, and so the way that works is you kind of divide a physical modelling synth into two sections. You've got the exciter and the resonator. So the
Yeah.
exciter is this bit up here,
Right.
at the top.
Okay.
And the exciter is, if you think about physical modelling like plucking a guitar string, for example. So like the exciter would be like your pick. So the actual noise hitting the string,
Yeah.
creating a vibration. And then you've got the resonator section. And that is like in an acoustic guitar, how the noise of that string resonates and
Yeah.
it kind of resonates throughout the body.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's going on. That's what you're modeling in a physical modeling synth. So
Yeah.
you've got your exciter part, which creates the initial sound, and then the resonator, which creates the kind of harmonic pitches around
Yeah.
that.
Sure. Okay.
The way that's done within Steampipe is using what's called a Karplus-Strong algorithm.
Yeah.
So simplifying this all a little bit, that's basically what that is using is like a really short, tight delay setup. So you get this resonant delay where the repeats are happening so quickly that you kind of get a resonant tone.
Yeah.
And then you can play that tone by using kind of key tracking from a keyboard or whatever.
Yeah. Of course.
So it's quite complicated compared to like subtractive synthesis anyway.
Yeah.
And then kind of beyond the fact you've got that delay, the way it works is that kind of delay is paired with like a feedback loop with filters. So you've effectively got this exciter section up here, which is kind of creating the initial sound. Then this resonator section where you've got sound that's going through a delay and then going through a saturator, which kind of boosts the signal, but also changes the harmonic qualities. And then some of that is going back round into this feedback loop.
Yeah.
You can filter some of it out and do things like adjust the kind of decay and release time and things.
There's a lot to play with.
So there's a lot to play
Yeah.
with. But what that does essentially, so put that all together, and what it's really good at is kind of creating kind of mallet type sounds, things like, marimbas, glockenspiel, that kind of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But also like stringed instruments,
Yeah.
bowed instruments, and organ sounds, stuff like that.
So, let's hear this in action.
Yeah, so let me talk you through what's going on and kind of show you some of these
Yeah,
parameters
yeah,
as we go
yeah.
through. So this is the default sound here.
Using circuit tracks as your...
It should point out this is desktop.
Yeah.
So we need to plug something into it. I will come on to speaking a little bit more about that later.
Sure.
But let me just sort of demonstrate what's going on. So this envelope bit at the top, the envelope is one of the more familiar bits of the kind of synth design.
Yep.
Obviously, envelopes are quite common on a lot of, on pretty much every synthesizer.
Yeah.
The difference here being that this envelope is actually at the start of the signal chain rather than the end.
Yeah.
So when I press a note down here, and then kind of tweak this envelope, rather than shaping the amplitude like you would do at the end of a normal synthesizer, what this is doing is shaping the sound that's being used as the exciter, which is controlled by this bit here. So this control here, we've got the kind of DC noise control, and that switches basically between the kind of this more tonal sound and a noise sound here. I'll turn this because this is paired here with a low pass filter, a resonant low pass filter, which has got its own resonance, which this can function in 2 modes. This 1-pole mode, and then if I turn that off, you can actually then get this to self-oscillate as well. Let me turn down this resonator a bit here, so you can kind of hear this a bit more.
Oh yeah, sure.
And if I turn up key tracking, we can kind of so that can kind of act like a resonant filter that's generating its own tone there. But these are the controls basically that we've got over that initial exciter noise. We've got, again, kind of key tracking for the envelope. I can set velocity, which controls the velocity level of how that applies to the exciter. We can key track the filter, and then I can also use this envelope amount here, and what that will do is send the same envelope we're using for the kind of shape of that exciter to the filter there as well.
Okay.
So all of this gives us control over that initial sound, and then that is coming down here into the kind of resonator section, which is where we've got our delays and our kind of feedback loop here.
Yeah.
You've got decay and release controls here. So first, this push one here, this is kind of affecting what they call the sort of push-pull of the exciter going into the resonator, which is kind of, it sort of alters, I guess, the forcefulness of like how much you're kind of affecting this resonator. So you can kind of hear. So yeah, so we can alter kind of the forcefulness that we're hitting that resonator there. Decay and release kind of function like you would expect from using kind of other synths. The decay alters, how that resonating delay line drops off as I hold down a note, whereas release controls how long it hangs around afterwards. Then you've got this saturator, and like the saturator is again kind of part of this feedback loop. You can change it between soft and hard clipping here, which will alter the tonality, and then you can change the symmetry again, which kind of which alters the harmonics that are being introduced as we kind of saturate it.
Okay.
So these controls down here, basically what these do is, as I said, the resonator, you're using like tune delays, which is creating these pitches. And what these let us do is kind of adjust the tuning of these and the harmonics. So you've got the main tune here.
Yeah, coarse, and then fine as well.
And then fine tuning, which kind of work as you would expect.
Yeah.
It's worth noting at this point actually that you've got this tune button here, which is a really handy thing on Steampipe. What that basically does is brings up a tuning menu that kind of makes it a bit easier to like reset things, because it's quite, as you will see the more I start talking about these things, it's really easy to start getting a bit lost in terms of your kind of tuning and harmonics.
Can be a bad thing.
So speaking of harmonics, you've got this harmonics control here, and what this does is this alters what they call the stiffness of that response. So that would be that's kind of it alters the way that the harmonics are spread out.
Yeah, okay.
Effectively, it's sort of. So you can hear as I adjust that, it kind of alters the tonality quite a bit. And then you've got these here, the split and polarity. So split, what that does is that allows us to split this kind of delay box, which is using 2 delays, into 2.
So
and
single
then,
ones, as it were.
Yeah, and then we've got this split point here. And what that's particularly good for is kind of bell type sounds, or ones where you've kind of got these sort of separate resonant elements.
Yeah.
So
badly played.
yeah, this is. I've set this up in a way that sounds quite horrible, but you know.
Yeah, I like it. I quite like it though.
See what I mean?
But the wrong way of playing like a clarinet, as it were, you know, you're overblowing a reed or something like that. You can get all that sort of articulation out of it as well.
Yeah, overblowing is an interesting. It's interesting you've mentioned that, because actually that's one thing that you can kind of. It's an effect that Erica Synths described that you can achieve using these filters here. Actually,
right.
Meaning that these again, as part of this feedback loop, you've got a low pass and high pass filter, but because of the way everything is feeding back, these can have quite big effects on like kind of the tonality, and they're quantized to MIDI notes. Right. So because of that kind of opening, closing, you see you can kind of
I quite like that sort of mashing it up a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you've also got this polarity switch here, and what that does is switches between having all of the harmonics present and kind of focusing on mostly just odd harmonics, which again kind of alters the tonality of it.
Yeah.
Now you will note that as I've been sort of demoing all of this, I've been making weird sounds that don't necessarily sound pretty good, and that's because one thing I will say.
I like them.
One thing I would say about Steampipe is that it doesn't necessarily behave in a particularly predictable way a lot of the time, which is actually something I really like about it.
And I'm coming round to this.
Yeah. So and so we've got a bit more to talk about, but before we go summing up and things. I will say at this point, it's like even if you kind of understand what's going on here, you can kind of have a pretty good idea of what you want to do, and suddenly you'll turn something, particularly when it comes to like these filters or anything involving the feedback loop, you'll be like, okay, I've got an idea of what's going on here, blah, 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 turn something, and suddenly it sounds in a way completely unpredictable, and you've no idea why it's done it.
Yeah.
Now, I personally quite like that about it, but it's something that...
Not everyone's cup of tea.
Well, not to suit everyone. So a couple more things to talk about here. Voice section down here. So this is 8-voice polyphonic. Yeah. So we can kind of play nice chords. I say nice chords, let's put it on a preset so you can actually hear... let's go. Let's have a nice pipe organ.
Beautiful.
There we go. Polyphonically. You can also play it as a monosynth.
Yeah.
We've got a unison mode. And we've got this nice drift here, which can detune voices a bit. Give us a nice thick bit of width. And then you have also a glide control for some nice portamento. You got that there.
Yeah.
And then we've got this reverberator. So the reverberator is, as you would expect, a reverb, but it's got a kind of nice. It's got a nice big mix control, which you can kind of get hands on with. Spread controls for a bit of width, and this spin control here, which will detune. And you can kind of, particularly if you turn up the size here, got EQ controls here to tame it a bit, but if you turn up the size, you can get really big sounding.
Yeah, it's a bit of shimmer sort of to that as well, isn't there?
Yeah, from this nice kind of spin detune here and spread. It's kind of very digital sounding in a good way, do you know what I mean? I really like that kind of digital reverb. It's kind of got a bit of the kind of Valhalla-esque tone to it, which suits it really nicely. LFO section down here where we have 5 LFOs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that, which we can route to a variety of different places. Yeah. With controls here, kind of delay, speed, shape, amount, kind of syncable, so kind of pretty standard LFO stuff. You can also route MIDI in as modulation sources, so you've got a few MIDI inputs. Okay. And actually, what I really like about this is that it works really nice with MP controllers. In fact, to the point that
very well, yeah.
we're using circuit tracks here because it's kind of what we had to hand in the studio to hook up a MIDI thing.
Yes.
But to the point that I would say, if you are interested in one of these, I would recommend very much getting your hands on something that can churn out MPE.
Yes.
Because it becomes, the more expression you can feed into it, the more expressive it becomes, the more interesting. And I mean, on that front, it is one thing I would say is a potential negative about Steampipe is that I find it quite interesting, I guess, that it's sold entirely as a desktop thing without any sequencing or keyboard of its own.
Yeah.
Particularly as having a very specific type of keyboard does really bring out more of it. Like, it's, I guess it kind of, you know, it keeps the size down, it keeps the price down, but it almost feels a shame to not have it connected to its own really nice expressive keyboard. Which kind of probably would have showcased it at its best as an instrument. But just bear in mind, you know, I played around with this with a couple of MPE controllers earlier, and like as soon as you get that more expression involved, it becomes more and more interesting. Another thing to note, you've got an audio input at the back here, and you can use that as an external input for this exciter here, which again adds some nice.
Does it replace that section, or is it just
it replaces this DC section and kind of goes through the envelope there. So that's another little kind of interesting thing you can do with it. And actually, the more I've played around with Steampipe, the more I've begun to really enjoy it. So I think my feeling when we first saw this was the same as you, that it kind of seems like a bit of a one-dimensional idea, like this kind of woodwinds and things, and like
physical modelling isn't sexy. Apologies for anyone who thinks it is.
I don't agree with that.
Well, I think that, you see, this is making me feel like it is now, but I never used to think that with sort of, you know, back in sort of the 90s when, you know, sort of workstations were pretty much all physical modelling, and it was just a bit boring. But this, there's more control. Why does it have to be so bloody big?
Yeah, I mean, another thing I would say about this is that when we first saw it, I think you kind of, obviously these presets here, you've got like kind of your lots of flutes and pan pipes and things like that, which are the kind of things you expect from a physical modelling thing called Steampipe. But actually, there's a lot of presets on here and they're really good. Like I really rate, got flugelhorn, but you've also got like some much synthier.
Loving that. Loving the low end of it. And the digital aspect of it where we can actually have the steps, I quite like that.
And let me show you just like, so you just keep playing.
I'll play.
Playing that. You just play, hold on, let me lift this up.
Go under there.
You play that and I will just start, because obviously I can't do two things at once. And let me just start showing you how quick you can kind of just tweak some things and suddenly this does things that you're not expecting.
Getting gritty.
So you kind of see what I mean. It's like how, but you see what I mean. It's how quickly, like, just messing around like that and playing around with some things in this feedback loop, you can quite quickly go from what sounds like, you know, you might be putting on like, oh, let's just put on, you know, a classic organ, tweak some things, and then
we're not an organ anymore.
And suddenly it sounds really weird. And it's really fun for that kind of thing, particularly if you're kind of, holding down droney kind of patches, long ambient things. Let's go. What's the sound there? I've literally no idea what's going on here, but yeah, again, it's just I have no idea really what I'm doing there, but
Yeah.
But it's quite fun like that, and I like that in a synth.
Yeah, it's got lots of exploration, an explorative factor to it, which is much fun. I'm still a bit hung up on the size of it. For a digital machine, I know that we're dealing with the size of these rotaries and that they are spaced out perfectly. That's fine, but you could use smaller ones, right? Like, for instance,
I don't agree with you on that. And this is, I think we
can fight over this.
I think there's a whole other video in us doing this at some point, an argument about what is the actual right size for a synth. Because actually, I would put that in a real plus point for this, because I hate the fact that synths are all getting smaller, and these are the right size rotaries for me. Right. To want to get, like, if I'm going to have a hardware synth, I want to get hands on, I want to tweak stuff. If you get smaller than that, you could, you're right, it's a digital thing, you could put
I'm
it
not saying Volker-esque, I think that's a bit too small.
I feel like this is the right size, but again...
I'm just saying, we'll show you on here, we're looking at the, we've got the Ecolocator here. So we've got the same style knobs. What do they call these? I can't remember what they're called, but slightly smaller. I'm wondering, I'm just saying, maybe if it was that little scaled down, I don't know. This is a substantial machine to have in a studio that isn't going to be, I wouldn't say this is like main synth stuff, is it? This is a curio.
It is a bit of a curio. Yeah. And so that, on that point, so the downsides of this, I don't think, like, in terms of what it is and what it does, I really like it, and it does really cool things. I don't think there's really kind of negatives in the design.
No.
But what I would say is, like, so the retail price is, UK price is about £900.
Yeah, just kind of below it, I think.
Yeah, around that, and it's kind of similar sort of price in the kind of euro, and Lord knows what it's going to be with dollars with tariffs at the moment.
Clue.
But yeah, I'm not even going to guess. But you know, it's not the cheapest instrument, and I don't think it's bad value.
No, I get what you're saying.
But you do have to overcome the fact that, like, it is a cool hands-on way of doing physical modelling. But there is a lot of really good software physical modelling synths out there. You've got Collision in Ableton, you've got Chromophone, various other kind of things. The physical modelling is kind of part of within other synths as well.
Yeah.
Like, you can experiment with similar sounds at a much cheaper price point, so you have to really want the hands-on thing.
Yeah.
I do really like the hands-on element of this, and like I said, the more you kind of tweak it, the more you play around with it.
Yeah. And their approach to
it gets
is unique.
Yeah.
Right.
The other thing to bear in mind, obviously, like I said, is that you want like an MPE or at least kind of poly aftertouch expressive controller to work with this to get the most out of it.
So like one of the Rolly ones or an Osmo.
Yeah, so it's worth factoring that in. So, you know, whether it feels, as you say, it's a bit more of it's not your first and only synth.
No.
And you've got to, I think, really want it in hardware form and really want to experiment with it to make it worth buying.
Yes.
But that's not to say it's not worth buying, because I think there's a lot I really like about it. What we're going to do now is I'm going to get, look, we've got Ecolocator plugged in here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, just before we sign off, just put these together, because I think Ecolocator is worth mentioning. Is also from Erica Synths. It's also in collaboration with 112 dB.
Yeah.
It's a delay using some nice things. It's kind of quite similar to like pitch loop in Ableton, because you've kind of got these shimmery, pitchy things, and it sounds a bit of marimba. And they sound really nice together, and that's the only reason I wanted to have these plugged in.
That's awesome. I said this before, and we were saying earlier, delay is it's just the best, isn't it?
It is. I love a little pitchy delay like that.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
I love this.
And with that, I think your hot stone massage is ready.
Thank Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's talking. Still going. Let's just let it. Lovely. Thanks for that, Si.
Cool.
Love to know what you guys think about Steampipe. Is this something that you would sort of invest in heavily? It is a heavy investment.
We'll demo some presets.
Yeah, let's get into those.
Yeah.
Obviously, like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon for some more gear demos. So until then, cheers.
Thanks.